I'm Hannah, 34 years old, living in a small town on the outskirts of Seattle. From the outside, my life seems so peaceful that many would call it boring. Every morning, I wake up at 6 a.m., brew a cup of chamomile tea, and read a few pages of a book under the soft sunlight streaming through my kitchen window. I work as a city library manager, where old bookshelves serve as a safe haven for someone like me, always seeking tranquility. My husband Ethan is the complete opposite. He's a mechanical engineer immersed in blueprints and numbers calculated down to the millimeter. Ethan lives in a world of steel and bolts, where every problem can be solved with logic. Meanwhile, I dwell in the realms of Austen and Fitzgerald, where emotions are refined through every written word. Yet, it was precisely this difference that brought us together. I loved the way Ethan quietly fixed a short-circuited lamp without a single complaint. He loved how I would pick up an old book and tell him stories about fictional characters as if they were real friends. Between us, flowery words were unnecessary. Just having each other's presence was enough to warm our little home. Ethan had a nearly unbreakable habit. Every weekend he would drive nearly 3 hours out to rural Spokane to visit his parents. They're traditional farmers living in a small wooden house surrounded by endless meadows. Ethan would help them mend fences, check the water pump, or simply sit and share a strong cup of black coffee with his father. I had never joined him, partly because of work, partly because I believed that was his sacred time with family. But that didn't mean I was distant. Every week I prepared a basket full of food for Ethan to bring: homemade apple pies, jars of strawberry jam I made myself, and carefully simmered chicken soup for his mother. The act of contributing to that small ritual made me feel connected, even from afar. Ethan never forgot to share little stories from each trip. Tales of his father spilling gasoline for forgetting to tighten the cap, or his mother arguing with the hens after being pecked on the leg. I would sit there, smiling, feeling an odd peace settling in. Each week he would return as quietly as he left, but with a lighter, brighter gaze. We weren't the perfect couple you see in magazines. He had days of complete silence during dinner, and I had moments where I'd lock myself in the study just to rearrange books by spine color. Yet, amid that silence and busyness, we still chose each other. I used to think marriage was a series of dramatic moments, like the novels I adored. But Ethan taught me that true love often lies in simple acts: refilling the water jug, remembering my favorite coffee, or patiently listening to me ramble about a fictional character for hours. My world was neat, orderly, where everything had its rightful place. Ethan brought me structured chaos, scattered blueprints, and stray toolboxes in the garage. We were different, but perhaps that's why we fit together better than any other pieces. For me, differences aren't barriers. They're the reason each day brings something new to love about him. And until that day, I firmly believed so. In recent months, however, I began to notice something different about Ethan. He remained the man who quietly made our morning coffee, still asked about my latest book, still drove to Spokane every weekend like clockwork. Yet beneath all those familiar routines, something was shifting. Evenings changed. Instead of reading the newspaper or watching old movies with me, Ethan would sit silently by the living room window, eyes fixed on the darkened yard. No more casual stories about his parents, no more playful anecdotes about farm life. Whenever I tried to spark conversation, he would offer a faint smile and say, "Nothing special, sweetheart." I thought perhaps it was exhaustion. After all, Ethan was handling a new bridge construction project at work, hundreds of blueprints, countless sleepless nights. I didn't want to be the nagging wife, nor did I want to make him feel scrutinized. So I stayed silent, supporting him from the background as I always had. But some things, the more you try to ignore, the clearer they become. Last Friday night, I noticed Ethan packing his bag faster than usual. Typically, he would methodically fold each shirt, double-check his tools, even asking if I wanted to send anything to his parents. But this time he was rushed. He even folded a dust-stained jacket from last week without care. When I asked, he brushed it off. "I'll clean it later." Odd. Ethan was never one to be careless with himself. That night, as he lay beside me, his back turned, I stared into the dark. His breathing was steady, feigning sleep, but I knew from the tension in his shoulders, he was wide awake. The next morning, Ethan left early, hurriedly gulped down half a cup of coffee, kissed my forehead, and was out the door. He forgot his cup on the table, steam still rising. Ethan never forgot his coffee. Something was cracking. I sat by the window for hours, my mind swirling with endless questions. But instead of drowning in suspicion, I decided to do something I had never done before. I would go to his parents' house myself. Without telling anyone, without sending Ethan a single message. Thinking about the surprised look on his parents' faces when they saw me appear, my heart felt slightly lighter. Maybe a small surprise would bring some joy to the family. And it would also allow me to see for myself the truth behind the doubts growing inside me. That very morning I went into the kitchen. The jars of strawberry jam I had made last month were still neatly arranged on the shelf. I took 2 jars, added a few blueberry tarts. Ethan always said they were his mother's favorite. I also included a few jars of pumpkin soup, made from my grandmother's recipe, the dish my father-in-law once praised during a rare family visit to Seattle. A nearly 3-hour drive didn't feel as exhausting as usual. Perhaps this time I wasn't just carrying a basket of food, but also a curiosity I could no longer suppress. Miles passed beneath the tires, rows of trees along the roadside turning a fiery red as fall embraced them. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't want any noise drowning out my thoughts. For the first time in years, I felt like I was stepping into something uncertain, something beyond the control of my usual calmness. When the sign Spokane, 10 miles, came into view, my heart began pounding harder. I told myself, maybe it was just my mind overthinking. Maybe Ethan was simply tired. Maybe I would find him smiling brightly on the wooden porch, helping his parents tidy up hay bales, just like always. But deep down, I knew this time would not be like the others. The dirt road leading to my in-laws' farm appeared ahead. I slowed down, the tires crunching softly over a layer of dry leaves. The old wooden house stood still, peaceful under the deep red maple trees, just as Ethan had always described. But that morning, that very peace made my heart freeze. I pulled over, turned off the engine, and sat silently, staring through the windshield. A figure stepped out onto the porch, a woman with pale blonde hair tied up high, wearing a beige knit sweater. Beside her was a little girl around 4 or 5 years old, skipping around the hydrangea bushes. The child chirped out, "Daddy," in a sweet, familiar voice that made my throat tighten. Ethan walked out from the house, holding a thin blanket. He bent down, gently wrapping it around the child's shoulders. The look in his eyes, calm, tender, squeezed my chest. It was a look I hadn't seen directed at me for years. Not because he hadn't cared, but because, somewhere along the way, he had stopped seeing me that way. The woman stood quietly, smiling at the two of them. Her smile wasn't boastful, not possessive, but warm in a way that stung. She reached out, brushing Ethan's hair with a touch so natural, so intimate, it was as if they had lived together forever. Ethan didn't flinch, didn't pull away. He simply placed his hand gently over hers, holding it softly. I felt myself freeze in that moment. My mind spun wildly, every sound around me muted. The stories of quiet afternoons fixing fences, of coffee with his father, suddenly became hollow and meaningless. Because right before my eyes was a truth I could no longer deny. Ethan had another family, another woman, and another child. I gripped the steering wheel, nails digging deep into my palms. I wanted to throw open the door, confront him, scream out everything shattering inside me. But my throat was dry, choked. I could only sit there, staring at him, lifting the little girl into the air, spinning her around as her laughter echoed pure and bright. The little girl wrapped her arms around Ethan's neck, giggling, "Daddy, higher, higher." And for the first time, I heard Ethan laugh. A genuine, heartfelt laugh, full of happiness I thought had long faded. The deepest pain wasn't the betrayal itself, but realizing I had been left out of that moment, for a very long time. I turned my face away, feeling as though someone had carved into my chest. Not a sharp, clean cut, but something slow, relentless, inch by inch. Ethan had made his choice. And I was on the outside. I lowered my head, trying to steady my breath. The cold wind slipped through the cracked window, carrying the damp scent of earth and grass. I didn't know how long I sat there. Only when I heard the wooden door close behind them did I quietly start the engine, turning the car around and driving away. No tears, no accusations. Only an expanding emptiness growing inside my chest. The car rolled slowly along the familiar road, leaving behind the little wooden house, with secrets buried for years. I had no idea where I was going. I only knew I needed to get away from that place, away from the suffocating truth, closing in on me. In my mind, the child's innocent voice still echoed, growing clearer with each repetition. Dad. That simple call, so light yet as heavy as a stone pressing on my chest. Turns out, Ethan had never lied about his weekend trips. He really had been going home. But it was a different home. A different life. A different Hannah, not me. I drove like a sleepwalker, my eyes fixed on the endless road ahead, not truly knowing where I was headed. The streetlights blurred, gliding past the windshield like soulless streaks of light. A numbing cold crept from my fingers, clutching the wheel all the way to my temples, tightening until it became unbearable. I didn't cry. Strangely enough, even though my heart felt like it was being crushed, my eyes stayed dry. What was rising in my chest wasn't weak tears, but something deeper, heavier, slowly burning through every inch of my skin from within. Familiar images flashed before me, like a slow-motion film I couldn't turn off. I remembered Ethan coming home after his weekend trips, clothes smelling of wild grass, dark circles under his eyes, yet his gaze always distant. When I asked, he would smile faintly and say, "Mom and Dad are doing fine. Nothing ever changes in that town, sweetheart." I remembered the nights Ethan claimed to work late, leaving me with a cold dinner table and an empty chair across from me. I used to tell myself, "He's working hard for our future." I believed it. I wanted to believe it to the end. But blind trust turned out to be the sharpest knife. Scattered conversations suddenly pieced themselves together, each small detail forming a complete picture, a picture of deceit, prolonged, calculated, and far crueler than I had imagined. I had lived in a house meant for two, but only I believed it was a complete home. A roadside rest stop appeared ahead. I steered into the parking lot, turned off the engine, and sat silently under the dim glow of flickering neon lights. Isolation crashed over me like an undertow, pulling me into a silent panic. I asked myself, why? Why did Ethan choose to live this double life? Was he so cowardly that he couldn't tell the truth, or did he simply not respect me enough to let me know? I clutched my own arms tightly, as if afraid I'd fall apart into pieces. Anger surged up, clogging my throat. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to despise Ethan for dragging me into this humiliating pit of betrayal. But, amidst the rage, I realized what hurt most was the emptiness. For years, I had invested all my trust in that man, believing in the mornings he made me coffee, in the gentle glances he gave me when we read together. Now, all that remained was suspicion. I rested my head against the steering wheel, closing my eyes, trying to suppress the dizziness. But the questions kept screaming. When did it start? Who is she to him? Does that child even know I exist? I couldn't escape those questions. The anger slowly gave way to cold clarity. Running away wasn't an option. I couldn't let myself be swept further into Ethan's web of lies. I needed to know the truth, see it, hear it. I took a deep breath, icy air filling my lungs. Now more than ever, I knew I had to face this. Not with explosive rage, not with tears, but with ruthless composure. I turned on my phone, my hand still trembling with tension. A message from Ethan popped up, sent over an hour ago. "I'll be home late, something came up. Don't wait for dinner." Lies. Another sweet, familiar lie. I didn't reply. I didn't delete it either. I slipped the phone back into my bag, started the car, and pulled out of the rest stop. This time, I wasn't running. I would see Ethan, look him in the eye, and let him admit with his own mouth what I had already witnessed. No yelling, no tears, just the truth. The road back to Seattle stretched endlessly ahead, but this time, with every mile passed, I felt a little calmer. The pain was still there, throbbing, persistent. But beneath that ache, something else was taking shape. A cold determination from someone who now knew she had nothing left to lose. And when Ethan opened that door tonight, the fragile woman he once knew would not be standing there anymore. The next morning I returned to Spokane. No longer overwhelmed by the storm of emotions from the day before, no longer reeling from being pushed out of my safe zone. Today I wasn't coming as a betrayed wife. I came as a stranger, someone ready to face the truth, without illusions or detours. That woman, her name was Claire. I learned that after a few phone calls, after asking some old acquaintances around town. Claire used to be a preschool teacher in Spokane, left her job after giving birth. She lived with her child in a small house right next to Ethan's parents' farm. Something so simple, yet in all these years, Ethan had never once mentioned her. My car stopped right in front of the white picket fence, the same place where I had seen it all the day before. My heart pounded as the gate opened, but this time, I didn't let myself step back. Claire stood in the yard, holding a garden hose, watering the lavender lining the path. Her pale blonde hair was tied high, neat. She wore a plaid shirt and worn-out jeans, the calm demeanor of a woman well acquainted with simplicity. I approached, my voice steady. "Hello, sorry to bother you. I heard there are some beautifully preserved old houses around here. Yours looks quite impressive." Claire looked up, her gray eyes holding my gaze for a long moment. There was no defensiveness, no forced friendliness, just a slow, calm observation. "Thank you. It's very old, but I try to keep it from falling apart." She gave a faint smile. "Would you like to come in and see?" I nodded. Though I had braced myself, my heart still tightened as I crossed the threshold. Inside, the house smelled of toasted bread and light floral powder. The furniture was simple but tidy. In one corner, children's toys scattered about, a plastic truck, a wooden block set, and a few comic books. "My son Max is a bit messy," Claire explained when she noticed my gaze lingering there. Her voice carried a trace of fatigue but also deep affection. "How old is Max?" I asked, keeping my tone as neutral as possible. "He's turning 6 this year," Claire replied, smiling softly. "He's quite the handful. Luckily, Ethan helps me keep him in line." My throat went dry. She had said his name so naturally, as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. "Ethan comes here often, doesn't he?" I swirled my tea, eyes never leaving Claire's face. She paused, her expression softening for a beat. "Once a week. It's nothing dramatic, we're just friends now. But Max needs his father." I remained silent, waiting. Claire set her cup down, sitting straighter, her eyes locking onto mine with a frankness that left no room for evasion. "I know who you are. I knew the moment you stopped your car out there yesterday," Claire said, without a trace of accusation. "Ethan never gave me all the details about you, but I'm not stupid." A sharp pain lanced through my chest, but I kept my composure. "Then why did you stay silent? Why has he never told me about you and Max?" Claire sighed. "Because he's scared. Ethan doesn't handle things well when they make him feel like a terrible person, and believe me, he lives with that fear every single day. He has a family." I said slowly, each word cutting like a blade. "He has me." "I know," Claire responded unflinching. "And I have no intention of taking Ethan from you. We ended long ago. Between me and him, there's only Max now, a child who did nothing wrong." No excuses, no pretending to justify. I looked at the woman in front of me, the one who had once been part of Ethan's life in a way I never knew. She wasn't a rival, she wasn't someone who had intruded. She was simply a mother, struggling to protect what was best for her son. "Ethan is a good father," Claire continued. "No matter how lost he gets, to Max, he's still the only hero." I didn't know how to feel. Angry? Hurt? Or perhaps something more painful. Acceptance. We sat in silence for a long while. Only the sound of the wind rustling through the lavender outside the window filled the space. "Thank you for seeing me," I said, standing up, feeling my legs both light and unbearably heavy. Claire didn't hold me back, didn't add anything more, but as she walked me to the door she paused, speaking softly. No matter what happens, I believe you're stronger than Ethan thinks. I turned away without replying, but inside her words cut like a blade. Sharp, clear, and strangely, the only thing keeping me standing at that moment. That evening our small apartment was suffocatingly silent. The dim yellow light from the kitchen cast a strangely gloomy hue over everything. Ethan sat on the sofa, head bowed, fingers interlocked, as if letting go would cause the whole world to collapse. I leaned against the door, watching him for a long time. Watching that silent figure, once the man I had loved for 10 years, yet now, painfully unfamiliar. I met Claire, I began, no pretense, no softness. Ethan looked up. His eyes were bloodshot, swollen, as if he had known this moment was inevitable. No more denials, no more excuses. How long did you plan to keep me in the dark? I asked, my voice not loud but each word razor sharp. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He leaned back, rubbing his face hard, as if trying to muster the last bit of courage. Hannah, I'm sorry. His voice was hoarse. I tried to tell you. Really. So many times. But every time I looked at you, I just couldn't. Couldn't? Or wouldn't. I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms. Ethan shook his head, defeated. Both. Claire? It happened before I met you. Back then, I didn't think it would go this far. But then she got pregnant. And I couldn't turn my back. I let out a bitter laugh. You couldn't turn your back, yet you managed to hide everything from me all these years? Ethan got up, took a step toward me, but I stepped back, keeping the distance. He stopped in the middle of the room, arms hanging limply, eyes filled with turmoil. I didn't know how to keep both worlds from collapsing, he admitted. I love you, Hannah, that has never changed. But Max is my son. I have a responsibility to him. I couldn't choose one side and let the other fall apart. So, you chose to lie to me, I said slowly, each word slicing like a blade. You built yourself two perfect worlds, one with me, one with Claire. And you fooled yourself into thinking that as long as everyone stayed quiet, everything would be fine. Ethan bowed his head, silent. His shoulders trembled, whether from exhaustion or drowning shame, I couldn't tell. I don't blame Claire, I continued, surprisingly calm. She didn't fight to steal you away. She lived her life, raising your child with everything she had. But you? How long did you plan to keep running, Ethan? I was afraid of losing you, Hannah. Ethan looked up, panic in his eyes. You're the only person who makes me feel like I'm still a decent man. If you knew everything, I was afraid you'd never look at me the same way again. You were afraid of my contempt, but not my pain when I found out the truth on my own? I smirked. You thought silence was protecting me? No, Ethan. You stayed silent to protect the perfect image you built for yourself. The room fell into silence again. I could hear my heartbeat, steady but cold. Tell me now, Ethan. I raised my head. Do you plan to live like this for the rest of your life? With a wife who only knows half the truth and a child growing up in the shadows of your lies? Ethan stepped closer, but this time, he didn't try to touch me. He just stood there, a few feet away, voice raw. I have nothing left to defend. If you want to hear everything, I'll tell you. If you want to leave, I won't stop you. But please, don't think my love for you was fake. I love you, but I've been a coward. I closed my eyes for a brief moment. All the anger, all the resentment, now just a hollow, icy void. I don't know if I can forgive you, Ethan. I opened my eyes, meeting his gaze. I need time to think, to feel, and to decide whether the man standing in front of me is still my husband. Ethan said nothing more, he only nodded, slowly, like a man accepting his own verdict. That night we didn't sleep in the same bed. Not because of anger, but because some distances, once formed, cannot be bridged by mere silence. And for the first time in 10 years, I felt like a stranger in my own home. I left Seattle early in the morning, when the city was still drowsy beneath a thin mist. On the passenger seat was a small bag, just a few sets of clothes, a notebook, and the old camera I had long forgotten. I wasn't running away from Ethan. I just needed a space wide enough to breathe, to find my own voice amidst the chaos that had just exploded. My destination was Whidbey Island, nearly a 3-hour drive from Seattle, where we used to go on dates in our early years. Back then, Ethan used to joke, "If you get tired of the city, I'll build you a cabin in the woods, where every morning you'll wake up to birds singing, every night you'll watch the stars." And I would laugh, "That sounds wonderful, but who will make my morning coffee?" Now, thinking back, those memories were sweet and bitter all at once. The small lakeside cabin was still there, nestled under dense pine trees. I rented it for a few days. A reasonable way to escape the relentless questions in my head. No phone. No email. Only the sound of the wind through the branches, and the faint, sharp scent of pine resin. Every morning I brewed myself a cup of tea, an old habit that now brought both comfort and bitterness. I opened my notebook, writing down fragments of memories, details that once seemed insignificant but now stood out with painful clarity. I remembered the first time Ethan took me to meet his parents. He nervously held my hand the entire time, palms sweating. I remembered when he stayed up all night to fix the bookshelf I had accidentally knocked over, silently, as if it was the most natural thing to do. Ethan was never good at expressing emotions with words, but he always showed it through small actions. Perhaps that's why I missed the early signs of change. I wondered, can love be both truth and lie at the same time? Can someone genuinely love, yet still hide a part of their life from their partner? Ethan didn't lie out of selfishness. He hid it out of fear. Fear of hurting me, fear of disrupting the fragile peace we had built. But that very cowardice had driven us both into tragedy. A tragedy he never prepared to face. I couldn't deny the pain he caused, but I also couldn't deny the years Ethan stood by me, kind and devoted in his own way. He was there when I lost my job, when my mother was hospitalized, when I was drowning in despair without even realizing it. He didn't run away. And that too was a truth. In the biting cold of Whidbey Island, I gradually realized, forgiveness is not about forgetting or excusing mistakes. Forgiveness is about accepting the imperfections of others and of oneself. On the third evening on the island, I sat on a wooden chair by the porch, watching the crimson sunset sweep across the lake. Inside me, the raging waves had started to settle. It wasn't that I was ready to forgive Ethan, but I knew I was ready to face reality without being suffocated by anger. I flipped through my notebook, my own scribbled handwriting reminding me, love is not a fairy tale with a perfect ending. It's a long journey of stumbles, forgiveness, and accepting that pain is part of love. My phone remained silent. Ethan understood I needed time. I wasn't sure what would happen after I returned, but I knew one thing. If we wanted to move forward, we had to relearn how to see each other as real people, with all the scars, not as perfect illusions. I closed the notebook, stood up, and took a deep breath. The salty sea breeze filled my lungs, sharp yet oddly clarifying. Tomorrow, I would return to Seattle. Not to continue living in lies, nor to end everything definitively, but to start an honest conversation, for the first time, between two people who once thought they knew each other completely. The day I returned to Seattle, a light rain fell. Not noisy, not hurried, just fine droplets. Enough to chill but gentle enough to make the heart soften. Ethan was sitting on the front steps, his gray sweater soaked, eyes fixed on the wet road. He had been waiting for me. I stepped out of the car without an umbrella, without a greeting. We looked at each other in a heavy silence. Then, it was I who broke the distance. I'm not going anywhere, Ethan. But we can't go back to the way things were. If we want to continue, you and I will have to relearn everything from the beginning. Ethan nodded. No excuses, no pleas, just a nod of acknowledgement. I knew that was all he could offer at that moment. The next morning, I asked Ethan to drive with me to Spokane. He didn't ask why. He didn't need to. We both understood the reason. On the drive, Ethan glanced at me occasionally, as if on the verge of saying something, but then stopped. I wasn't in a hurry. We had lived too long with half-spoken words. Now the silence felt necessary, like a thin layer of ice shielding a still bleeding wound. In the trunk I brought along a large basket. Inside were apple pies. Recipes Ethan's mother had taught me back when I was a newlywed. I wasn't sure if I was doing it out of basic courtesy or some vague desire to look reality in the eye without flinching. Claire greeted us with an unsurprised expression. She invited us in. No fuss, no distance. Max hid behind the door, only his curious eyes peeking out. "Hello, Max," I smiled gently, crouching down to his eye level. "I brought some pie for you. I heard you like apple pie." The little boy hesitated for a few seconds, then shyly nodded. The atmosphere inside the house gradually softened, as if the presence of the child had eased the invisible weight that had been pressing on us for so long. Ethan sat beside Max, carefully cutting the pie, a familiar gesture that stung. No one mentioned the past. No one forced unnecessary smiles. We simply sat there, sharing a quiet afternoon over tea and homemade pastries. Claire remained composed, just like the first time I met her, but this time there was a subtle lightness in her eyes. Perhaps she understood. I wasn't here to start a war. Nor was I here to reclaim anything. I came to see things exactly as they were. "Max really adores Ethan," Claire said, her voice light as air. "Even if he doesn't always say it, every Sunday morning he asks if his dad is coming today." I froze. That sentence didn't cut like a knife, but it pierced my heart in a different way, a truer way. We didn't strike any deals. There was no peace treaty among the three adults, but perhaps, that afternoon, in the simplicity and the silence, there was an unspoken acceptance. When we left Spokane, Ethan held my hand for the first time, after days of distance. His hand was warm, his grip firm but not desperate. I didn't pull away, but I didn't lean into him like before. That space, we needed to keep it, to learn how to fill it anew. The drive back to Seattle was under a light drizzle. I gazed out the window, seeing my reflection in the glass. Blurred, but no longer distorted. We were still us, but in a different version. Not perfect, marked with scars, but more real. I knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. Shattered trust couldn't be mended in a day, a week, or even a month. But at least, today, I had chosen not to walk away. Not because I was weak, but because I was strong enough to accept that sometimes forgiveness isn't about erasing mistakes, but about learning to move forward knowing the wound will always be there. Ethan glanced at me, saying nothing. He knew the answer didn't need words. And in that moment, I let the rain wash away everything that had passed. Hannah's story isn't just a tragedy of betrayal, but a painful and brave journey of facing the truth and choosing to grow in love. In real life, no one is free from cracks in relationships. What matters isn't hiding or denying them, but having the courage to acknowledge each other's imperfections, accepting pain is inevitable, and if there's still enough to hold on to, learning how to rebuild trust from the beginning. Forgiveness isn't easy, but sometimes it's a choice only the truly strong can make. What do you think about Hannah's choice? Would you have the courage to face and forgive like she did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to follow the channel for more meaningful stories about love, family, and life.